Hey everyone, welcome to the next episode of Outcomes. I'm your host, Barrett King, and as always, I am fired up to have a great conversation today. With me today is Rick. He is the CEO of Channext and founder of a really awesome business there, and someone that I have a ton of respect for. He's got a really interesting perspective on sort of partner optimization and a bunch of things that we're going to get into today. First off, though, my friend, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Barrett. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I am too. I know it's been a long time coming. We've been talking about doing this for a little while. Before we get into it, the question I ask everyone, super important, and I want to start off with that. What does partnerships mean to you?
Yeah, I think to me, it's actually a lesson I learned when I was a teenager from my parents, and I always think about it when I think about partnerships as well. And it's a Dutch saying, actually, but in English, you would translate it something like connected in freedom, which means you want to be together, but you're not forced to be together because you want to be together because you really help each other grow. And I think that's what partnership should really be all about, where you have like an equal partnership and you continuously give each other energy versus costing each other energy.
At the risk of maybe overstepping, that might be the best response I've ever had. That's brilliant. I love the idea that it's opt-in. It's by choice. It's about, kind of the outcome being better because we choose to do something together. And there's something fascinating about that because I don't think you hear it very often. Usually I just talked to somebody the other day about this. Usually it's something to the effect of, we need to do X for our company, so we should go find partners, right? And it's very like me-centric and for myself. So I imagine that served you well throughout your career, right? Thinking about partnerships in terms of that dynamic. Are there any learnings that you can share with the audience around specifically using the phrase that you described in terms of it being a mutual decision and the kind of betterness there that have helped you? So like, how do you enter into a partnership with that methodology, that mindset to ensure you stay focused on that joint outcome?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think indeed it's even broader than partnerships because I learned it about relationships.
Yeah.
So like whether it's with friends or in love relationships, etc. But I think we can actually learn a lot from that in partnerships indeed, like that you go into a partnership with good intention. And I think that a partnership should always start with giving from both sides. So that because then you really build that mutual trust as well. And from there, I think always keep checking with yourself. A partnership or a relationship can also always change. And I think it's very good for both you and the partner to keep reviewing together. Like, are we still giving each other energy, which can be in multiple forms, of course. But I think that's really a good question to ask yourself regularly, maybe in a quarterly business review or a yearly review. And also be honest with each other if you don't feel like that anymore after a couple of years. And maybe it's better to find new relationships that you also dare to speak out because then you end it in the most optimal way.
I like that, the honesty component of it and the openness, the directness, the forwardness really that comes with that attitude. When I was a sales rep many years ago, I used to always get on a call with somebody, especially discovery call, early sales process, kind of getting to know each other. And I always say, look, like the point of today is to get to know each other, get to know your business, your priorities, see if and or how we could even help you. And if it makes sense, we'll move forward and we'll talk about how we could do that. And if it doesn't, we'll part ways as friends. I'm going to probably add you on LinkedIn and just let me be a resource if you have questions down the road. And I always found it worked really well. And when I brought that to partnerships, much like you're describing, it became about the mutual outcome and us both saying, okay, my hand is still up to say, yes, I want to proceed versus the singularity of I need more from you. And I think there's something very valuable about that dynamic. And I think it actually bodes well for what we're going to talk about today, which is this idea of, is your partner bucket leaking? Is your program leaking? And you had an interesting fact. I don't want to spoil the kind of surprise, but what was that data set you were talking about in terms of how much partner activity you actually see in the average program?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think indeed we were just discussing like what do we hear a lot in the market at the moment? And I think what I hear everywhere is that people are very worried and frustrated that 80% of their partners in their program oftentimes is inactive. And therefore, what you see is that we keep recruiting more and more partners, but we are not able to make them successful and drive them towards self-sustainable revenue together. And therefore, there's so much partner churn and inactive partners. And I think that's a huge waste of resources in channel and partnerships.
Well, it's fascinating because it goes back to your previous statement, which is that if we're going to spend time together, we should both want to do so. The outcome should be for our benefit. And so now we're talking about, and it's a great springboard to it, the fact that so much of the people that you are perhaps hopefully initially entering into a dynamic with around the premise of we both agree this is beneficial are now inactive or unproductive. They're not adding value, certainly to the ecosystem, but I think most importantly, back to their own businesses. So Let's start with the probably, at least in my opinion, most obvious question of how do you identify those folks? What's some of the first things that you can do as you look at the landscape of your program? I'm thinking about it from that perspective, right? I'm a leader. Yep. I'm even a partner manager. Like I'm somebody who's sitting here saying, okay, how do I know who's inactive? How do I really identify the bucket of those folks, that 80% you're describing across the landscape of my program?
Yeah, I think it's really important to look at the total partner journey there. And then, of course, it starts with the recruitment phase, then the onboarding, training your partners, doing co-marketing, co-selling, and making sure you then get into a cycle where you keep doing that with your partners. And I think what I liked what you said just before we went into this topic is as well like how important it is in the beginning to ask questions as well and really find out what the partner wants as well. And I think it all comes down to curiosity. And that's such a crucial thing in the early phases of a partnership. So in the early phases of your journey and program, that you are super curious towards those partners that are coming in. And even before they are coming in, like what do they want to achieve? What is their desired outcome? Where do they want their business to grow? Because that really helps you to find out whether that partner actually is a good fit for your program. And I think that's the most important piece to start with. Make sure that you get into your partners into your program that actually are a great ideal partner profile fit, because that already helps so much in terms of how they will go through the rest of the journey. I always compare it to sales and customer success as well. Like you need to find the right partners, just not like you need to find the right customers to really have a smooth onboarding and a smooth partner or customer journey throughout there.
It's a good call out because it speaks to partner market fit, which I talk about quite a bit on the show lately. I have been at least. And I've been thinking about this intersection of value where you've got your customer, you've got your partner, you've got your business. And if you can kind of picture like the kind of three corners of a triangle. And in the middle of that is where all the value that each of you provide to that opportunity, to that moment come together. And I think if one of those sides of the triangle, if you will, is broken, if it's not contributing at the equal level to the others or the kind of balanced ratio, if you will, I think that's where you start to see the breakdown. And I would imagine that there's probably some leading indicators where that's starting to decline. So to your point, like when we think about, early recruitment, do we have a good fit? And like, sure, I imagine there's probably some stat that would say there's a percentage of those folks that you recruit, those partners that you want to work with, that are not a good fit. And that's going to happen naturally. That's the same in sales, same in CS. Like you're going to have a fall off rate. But the 80% is interesting. I've heard that before. I've talked to other folks about that specific fact. 80% of all of your partners are not productive and or dormant in some capacity. When you talk to folks that are having that, we'll call it realization, right? I think we're all maybe aware of it, but that kind of highlight that moment. What are some of the early pieces of guidance that you give them around, call it first steps? Let's talk about that first. So like, I now have just heard you say a bunch of the people that I think are doing work for me and helping my customers and folks that I think are getting value from working with me are not, in fact, doing either of those things. What are the first 2 or 3 things that I should do to start to rectify that and fix that situation?
I think there it is indeed, like the onboarding phase is crucial. I think just as, again, making the comparison to customer success, the renewal is one during the onboarding phase, the same as with your partners. That's where you give the first impression, where you need to show them very quickly that there's opportunity within your within that partnership as well.
So it's early value. What you're saying, not to jump on you, but you're saying is like this early value moment, this opportunity early on to deliver something to them that gives them value, gives them a reason to continue on.
Yeah, 100%. I think if you look at it from that perspective, a lot of partnerships eventually have as the goal, almost all your partners want to grow their business, where they need revenue to do that, etc. So that's usually, and I always say, like the best way to keep the attention of your partners is by generating revenue together. So that's really, I think, in the onboarding, you should be very specific, create a partner success plan where you have very clear milestones that you want to achieve as well, in terms of their employees being engaged, in terms of getting your target accounts together as well and doing opportunity mapping, and then very quickly start working on the first opportunities, because there's no better way to get partner engagement than when a partner feels like, hey, there is something here. And I think that's crucial as well, that you help your partners as early in the process, because usually we start with training from the technical side and things like that. But eventually the technical training will come if you really are working on opportunities together, or you're doing co-marketing where they see a lot of traction, for example, getting new end users in. And I think that's really a crucial part. Like have a very specific plan where they know where the finish line is as well. So you work together towards that finish line, but also a very high focus on getting towards first traction with end users.